So yeah, the talk on second act. Going back to my high school English teacher, Mr. Gaskell, he had a thing to say that whenever you're accepting an opinion, and you're going to get an opinion, this is not fact, this is not, there's no data. The first thing is you've got to understand the person giving you that opinion. So, first step of our play. Who's in it? Hi, I'm Pat. I'm a former .NET programmer. I joined the Ruby community in the mid-2000s. I have organized a Rails camp on my own and with John Barton at one point. I carpooled with John Barton to the very first Rails camp way back in the day. Shout out to Ben Askins, you're amazing. Shout out for Ben Askins, he's amazing. So yeah, I'm not Pat, I'm John. But so I'm basically evil Pat. If you remember the movie Sliding Doors, if like Pat and I were Gwyneth Paltrow, Pat continued in his career of programming and being a nice person to other people and doing awesome community shit. I became a development manager, so I've gone full dark side. So that's the first thing you need to know to understand my point of view is that I am post-technical. I'm a manager. Yeah, so I'm John Barton. I work at 99 Designs. Man, Keynote, it's art on your computer. I'm loving it. So 99 Designs is what we call a polyglot shop, which I believe is polite language for we make all our money on a big old PHP app. But we've got a bit of Ruby, got a bit of Go, got a bit of PHP in the mix. So the second thing is I feel like I've got a good perspective on a bunch of different communities at different phases of their life. If Go's in Act 1, PHP's in Act 3, Ruby, Act 2. This is where we're at. Also, how great was Coles' talk this morning? This is my side project. It is a bullshit web-scale, do-nothing web service born out of a frustration with opaque enterprise sales copy and an obsession with microservices. Check it out. It's great. So, Act 1, the setup. There are 3 acts traditionally in a narrative, so we're going to get into ours. Does anyone remember a time before iPhones? Yeah, so like 50% of all toilets were factory issued with a book like this, and the other 50% with one with tedious anecdotes about cricket. So anyway, I'm in my thinking zone, I'm reading this, I'm weighing up the different programming communities. There's a couple of quotes in here that I really love. There are no second acts in American lives. I think, G-sub, American, programmer, and like something started ticking for me. The next is like a famous quote from Chekhov, a playwright, about if... I just typed Chekhov into Google image search. That shit's legit, right? So yeah, if there is a pistol on the wall in the first act, it must go off on the next. Like, that's interesting. If we're in Act 2, what was our pistol in Act 1? So let's think about that. So I'm going to tell you a true story. A few years ago, I was involved in founding a tech startup. Tech startups, investment, you get investment. Did you know investors are rich? Like rich people? Like, it sounds really stupid, but I'm an overthinker, you might be too. I remember the first time I bought a beer for a millionaire, and I'd taken money off him to work on this startup, and I'm like, well, do I buy a Carlton Draft and show him that I take his money seriously? I'm not giving it away. But do I give a millionaire a Carlton Draft? Is that a thing? Is that appropriate? Anyway, mind blown. Business. But you get to know like a lot of business people, like people that found startups, like people like Collis is a non-technical founder. He hired engineers. You get to meet lots of people like that because you kind of move around the same meetups and whatever. So I was sitting down for a coffee with one of these guys that pay engineers to do stuff, the kind of people that pay engineers like you to do things. And we were talking about his product that's coming out of, like they proved out the MVP, there's a need, there's a market, and they need to build more. And he kind of asked me advice, like, what technology should we continue with? Who should we hire? How do we do it? How are we going to be best placed for now and the future? And, I'm here, I'm at the RubyConf, I love Ruby, I've been programming it since 2007, and I said Python. I don't know who else is old enough to remember the great Python wars of the mid-2000s. Like, that shit hurt right here. Like, I didn't like saying that. But you kind of look at the way the supply and demand is playing out with kind of talented, experienced engineers, the kind of people you need to lay the groundwork of a startup, and you look at whether they're venture funded or not. And if you're not venture funded, you can't have those Rubyists. That doesn't happen. So as much as it hurt me to say, the economically rational thing for this guy to do was to continue down the path of Python, which hurts my feelings. So in narrative structures, there's an incident in Act 1 that's like the incitement. This is it. You know, you learn about theater right now. So, and now we work through the incident. So I think it was really disappointing. This is the thing that motivated me to give this talk, was when I realized the rational thing to say was not Ruby. That's a problem for us, and it's for a couple of reasons. One, the Australian tech community, or startup community, is kind of small, and the health of our ecosystem needs, like, I think, a very fine balance between diversity and monoculture. You know, like, some degree of commercial exploitation requires some monoculture, but not so much that you're America with corn. So all of a sudden, by this startup becoming a Python startup, they're shut off from us as Rubyists, as people move between jobs and share experience and learn off each other and get that kind of, the ecosystem going, and the thing that lifts all of our boats together, we split off. You know, that's done. You know, we're not trading staff anymore. And you can talk about, any engineer can engineer in anything, but like Python, really? Those mid-2000s feels. The other thing that really sucks about this, and like, I really loved hearing Linda's talk today, but like, this is now an employer that will never hire a Rails girl graduate. Like, that's just gone. Like, our community, like, I don't have a slide for it, but we have I think we can all agree we've got a structural problem with diversity in technology and within the Ruby community here. Hands up if you're a, like, 20 to 30s white guy. Yeah, cool. So we can just accept that as a fact and move on. Don't need a slide. And so, but our community is so great and it's doing so much work to help address that. But boom, you know, new business that could have been hiring us or hiring graduates and doing something great to push our community aims forward, it's gone. We're in the senior developer trap. There are two things to read. I don't have time to go into them deeply to understand this trap. There's one blog post about senior developers. I've got a link, like a bunch of links at the end, that the problems of startups relying on senior engineers. We only hire senior engineers, and the kind of way that reinforces our structural problems with gender, with everything. It's a huge problem because we can only really address the issue at the front of the funnel, but a bunch of companies are like really set on hiring at the other end. So that's an issue. The other is, did anyone see on Hacker News a few weeks ago, a blog post like the crisis of the modern Perl programmer? It's basically that Perl was everywhere. Perl was us. Like, we're basically Lisp plus Perl with a flavor of Smalltalk. We could go that way. If we don't have like a good community plan about the growth of our industry and the growth of our community, we could be writing these really sad blog posts about the crisis of the modern Ruby dev. And I don't want that. I don't want that for us. I don't want it for me. I like programming. It's great. So, yeah, and the other thing about this supply-demand thing is, like, we've not been the most gracious winners of the supply-demand curve. It's not a good way to say it. We've been jerks a bit. I think people will actually be quite pleased to knock a few of us off our perch. So, you know, just like the plight of the white guys, like, we've been absolute assholes through all of history. So as soon as we're done, we are done. Like, they'll grind us into the dust, done. And, you know, they're not wrong. So, like, how do we get out? Like, lots of people are thinking about this, working on this, trying to improve our community, grow it. everyone likes to talk about Mats is nice, and so we are nice. And I think this is missing the point. This is probably what I love about Ruby, but this is not what grew our community. This is what makes it special. This is what makes us want to stay, but it is not what got 450 people in a place they can be in a room. It's this guy, right? And he's not nice. I don't know him. He could be great. But really, we are like, Rails is the virus through which Mats's amazing attitude has spread through the programming world. Like we're really Rails devs. This is RubyConf, basically. We want to think we're Mats, but really we're mostly DHH. Yeah, cool, controversial, sweet. But I think this is good. Like Rails, remember when Rails got invented? Like Rails is like the judo flip of software frameworks. It's all about being in the right place with the right leverage and just like turning, just fucking flipping shit. It's great. It's not about fucking about at the edges. We get right to the center of it. Everything that is non-essential is either automated away or we have dealt with through a culture of convention and alignment. Like going into a PHP shop and discovering people still argue about which folders to put files in. I'm like, shit, Rails is still useful to some shops just for like models here, controllers here, views here. Done. It's great. And Rails, I think, like it facilitated fuller stack devs than we'd ever seen before. I did a talk a couple of years ago where I kind of thought that Rails was like the first post-DevOps or pre-DevOps. There's something about Rails in that the way it leaks memory like the oil out of my old car, plus whatever else leaks out of it. I don't know cars. I'm a software guy. It's hardware. Versus the developer productivity you get with Rails. Like these things combined it was like a holistic view of like what's the output of software. It's like thinking a level back, and that judo flip of actually dollar in, dollar out, not just like what makes a dev go, what makes like for nice operations, like what we can trade these things off. And everyone, I think, very falsely draws the line of the full stack at the code or like the code running in production. But you think back like to Rails. Rails is the Basecamp framework. It came out of a product built by engineers, and that with Rails, the business shaped the framework and vice versa. It's not just that we leaked memory and wrote code fast, but we also changed the business models and the organizational structures that we did the work. Like all these things fed into each other in a way that I think was what actually made us effective in the early growth phase. It was not just we can write code and deploy it, but it's that we can make the really smart trade-offs between coding, operating, and business objectives. And so I'm thinking, like, is there a way we can bring back like the real full stack and help fix our problems? And so I just read this awesome book about post-war European history. Turns out Lenin has a textbook for this shit. We want a revolution. We have aims we want to achieve as a group. So what do the Leninists do? Step 1, infiltrate the police and management infrastructure of a state. I am asking a bunch of you to consider becoming development managers, to embed yourselves in our control plane, so to speak. And that's an unpopular thing. I know everyone loves to tweet about, where's my non-management career path? I want to do technical shit forever. It's great. Unfortunately, I think for the Ruby community to be what it needs to be to both survive and to address our problems is that option is kind of not really open to us now. But that's not that bad. Everyone's familiar with this quote. I think it's utter horseshit, in all honesty. It's a truism. Like, there's nothing in it. You play G-sub in that, and the argument is just as strong, only it's meaningless. Like, you think about DevOps, and what do we got? Promote a good programmer to be a sysadmin and you lose a programmer and get a shitty sysadmin, or vice versa. You want to get really controversial? Imagine G-subbing engineer for housewife and manager for engineer. Like structurally, it's the same argument, and if you said that out loud to someone, is that you make a housewife a programmer, that you lose a good housewife and get a bad programmer, you should rightfully be shown out. And I think the same holds with management. But what's missing? Like, no one's written this book for tech managers. It's a natural change. You know, things feel different. You don't know your mood. It's okay. Don't panic. You know, you're just going full of stack. You know, like the early days of Rails, we really owned the business outcome of our software. And so in the kind of size of companies and whatever we are, we're like, management's that. So myth one, you don't have to stop coding to become a technical manager, especially with Rails. Like, think back to why DevOps couldn't work in Java land, is that by the time you've written 6 pages of boilerplate to get something out of your database, and you still haven't delivered anything useful, and then compare that with the time that you work out like the precise number of thread pools or Java memories or rebooting. I don't even know what Java guys do. But there's a lot of things you've got to do, right? And that doesn't leave any room to evolve any skills outside of handwriting database access. But Rails is hyper-productive. Like, you can ship something useful in half a day and spend the other half of your day, you know, helping out your peers, working with everyone around you. So yeah, it's not as violent a transition in our community as I think everyone expects, and that's why I think you should be open to it. The other thing, you know this. Like, it's surprising how many skills you will already have from various things in your life that make the job absolutely achievable. Cool. What are they, you ask? So do I. It's in my notes. Right. No, actually, before I get into the things, I want to speak to imposter syndrome a little bit, because obviously you think taking that next step up requires a bit of confidence. Yeah, it's tough, but you'll be okay. Cool. So, XCOM. Who's played XCOM? You people are fully qualified to manage bus factor within an organization. You know how you've got like this awesome, what specialty is that? Heavy. Oh, gunnery sergeant. That's cool. That's awesome. Space, aliens, fighting, awesome stuff. Yeah, and then you're on that like mission like 3/4 of the way to the end and it dies, and then you're just left with a team full of these guys. Level 1. And those aliens are hard. This is staff management. You know, you've got to balance your projects around. You can't just rely on that one ninja rockstar hero to do all the projects, and then he quits, and then you're left with, oh, nothing. You know, you carefully, you know, balance your product portfolio, move people around, share XP. I mean, really, that's it. You just think about the different areas of code. How much XP do you have in user.rb? Oh, not enough. We should level you up. Oh, you're a dual class. You can do ops and dev. That's fantastic. Civ 3. Man, that's influential on my management technique. So much richness in the tech tree. It even has tech in the name. So, first thing, you start learning, like you treat an iteration like a turn in Civilization, so you know that you can do, you don't do things in the iteration, you just go, this iteration, this happens, then that. In this one, we're going to make this much science output. This one, we'll have a riot and adopt monarchy. Constitutional monarchy, you know, we're not savages. But this, to me, this is like the best way to visualize as you work your way through, like you think of Keith's talk when he talks about like version control, like that's step 1. Like version control is like the animal husbandry of the tech tree. You know, that then opens up new options like automated deployment. And then so you've got automated deployment over here. Maybe the next thing over here is test-driven development. And then when you've got automated deployment and test-driven development, you can go to continuous delivery. And you can just work your way through the tree. And so thinking with this mental model is handy because A, it's cool. B, you know implicitly that you just can't jump. You can't jump to space shuttles. It's not like you go from poking people with sticks to the moon. You've got to work your way up. And so a lot of management is just working your way up. The other is that, if players of Civ will know, is you can't just put 100% of your productivity into climbing that tech tree. You do have to every now and then go around and poke your opponents with sticks. Knock an empire or two off, and then come back and reopen it. Like, wallow in your amazing scientific progress. One other part. Oh yeah, the other thing is you don't want to be the team that won just by having a lot of people poking people with sticks. I mean, that's Java development, really. I mean, some people have won that way, but it's not our style. General OO design. It's amazing how applicable, good quality, like just concepts of information hiding, abstraction, API design, designed by contract. Like contract is a word that was taken out of business and put into software. I can just take it back, use it again. Like designing clean interfaces so that you can have 3 people over here working on one project and another group over here, and what are the ways that these groups interrelate, are all stuff you do every day. Naming is interesting. They want to name themselves often. So we've got Team Knight Rider and the A-Team at work at the minute. So you don't have any naming problems. But everything else, OO, is great. So let's say, hypothetically, that some of you are like, okay, maybe I could do some management stuff. That could be okay. What do I do? How do I do it? How can I toe dip into this? So I think the apprentice model is an incredibly interesting. ThoughtBot in the States are doing some really good work about it. I won't go too much into it, but that step of going from individual craftsperson to team of 2, that's basically the MVP of management and of leadership. I kind of wrote up a list. I'm not going to read them. You can read. You can read? Yep, cool. Won't go through the points, but one thing I did want to highlight is the bottom one. I think if there's one thing that people are the most afraid of stepping into, like really owning a group of people, it's firing. It's a possibility that you might have to do, and it's incredibly unpleasant. I'm not going to lie and say that it's fun, but it's the flip side of, like, we want to achieve real outcomes. We want to make a real change with our community and what we do. And the flip side of making real things happening with consequences is some of them are not bad. And I don't think this is an excuse to not act. It is a reason to act well. It is mostly avoidable, if you act with care. It's emotionally challenging when it comes up. But if you can face that kind of fear and feel like that the risk is worth it, I would say give it a try. Please give it a try. Like, imagine if 20 people in here goes, okay, I can make the case. I can bring on like a Rails Girl graduate or Code Academy or university, any of these things, and just say, I'm going to be personally responsible to get this person into our community in a way that matters. Like, that would make a great difference to our community. Yeah, so do it, try it. It's great. It's not that hard. It's a little bit hard. Final thing. The second fear is there are interpersonal challenges in managing a team of software developers. Some of them will choose Emacs against any better advice, and that's like the least of it. So I'm really hoping with this talk that maybe like 5 or 10 of you I've convinced to like step into leading a group of engineers to help push the industry half of our community industry puzzle forward. But for everyone else, I want you to support that Because if we as a group can't be manageable by fellow engineers, like, we will get the best outcome if we lead ourselves. But if we make that too hard to happen, like, the role will be filled by agile coaches and other petty tyrants. And at that point, like, we can't achieve our community aims. Like, then it's, you know, I think it's really important we do something about juniors. It becomes an input into someone else's process rather than something we as a group can really own. And so I don't think that's great. Notes, had another point. Yeah, so going back to, so the second act of your lives, I hope, is not to leave Ruby to be Go programmers or Node programmers or Haskell programmers once you get bored, but because that's just another first act. I want your second act to be to step into leadership in this community. The second quote, the pistol that goes off, I kind of built one into this talk. I'm here, but I forgot to mention it. Fuck. I'm here in my computer programmer's costume so that you guys can relate to me as a human. Because I'm post-technical. So I saw Hannah Donovan of This Is My Jam do a talk at Webstock, talk about burnout, and she spoke about how the kind of programmer uniform of the hoodie, the t-shirt, the crappy shoes, really bummed her out. Like, she's passionate about fashion and it's stifling her creativity to some extent, and it just made her unhappy. She wasn't herself in that. And so that in itself is a barrier to, I think, diversity for our group. Of people trying to lean into our social group, you know, there's a bit of pushback, magnetic repulsion. But the same happens in the reverse, because for me as well, like, I'm getting married in a few weeks purely because I learned to dress as an adult. And I'm super excited about it, and she hates this t-shirt. She really hates it. But as I'm kind of leaning a little bit out, like, I still write code a few days a week. As I'm leaning out of our group, I can feel the magnetic pull back in to make sure that I've got something that culturally identifies here. So I think part of being manageable, or helping this process, helping some of us become leaders, is to be aware that their role's changing a bit, but then they're not leaving us, they're not leaving the community, they're just, you know, growing a little bit, and we need to relax the programmer code and accept and deal with that. So that's kind of all my points. We're over. Come talk to me at the pub. It'll be great. I'll be drunk. So here's some links. I'm going to post these. They're all excellent reads. Like, 20 minutes is a really short time to talk, and these are complex things. But I really recommend you read all of these. Like, hopefully some of you can step into leadership, help us get on top of our community issues, and not be the second coming of Pearl. That's no good. Thank you.